Well, it's time for us to take a little bit of a closer look, and we saw that hackers have used a serious and previously unknown flaw in Microsoft's SharePoint server software to launch a major global cyber attack. The attackers hit US government agencies, universities, energy companies, and more, but it only affects on site servers, not the cloud service that Microsoft would rather you use. Stolen data and encryption keys could let hackers keep access to systems even after they are patched to mitigate the original vulnerability, and Microsoft has released a fix for some versions, but many servers are still at risk. Authorities in the US, Canada, and Australia are investigating, with over 50 organizations confirmed already affected so far. Tom, have you been able to find out the attacker's identity or their goals for this attack?
Well, I can tell you what their goals are: to steal as much stuff as is not bolted down and get out the door before anybody catches us. That's every thieves' idea, right? And SharePoint's pretty juicy because it's a document repository, so we can get in there and get all the stuff. As to the identity of the people, no, but I can wager a guess. According to some articles that I read, the traffic seems to be sourced from China. Go figure. Chinese hacking groups are exploiting vulnerabilities to steal American data. News at 11 and 12, and possibly at 2 if we can get into SharePoint and write up the scripts. So this is basically what happened: is Microsoft discovered a vulnerability and they announced it on Saturday. You knew it was bad if they announced it on Saturday, but they were already 2 weeks behind the curve because they were starting to see intrusions on the 7th of July. So they've had a 2 week lead time to get this patch put together. And you are absolutely right. They only patched the latest versions of SharePoint back to, I think, 2019. So if you're still running SharePoint 2016, why? Upgrade, please. Call Microsoft. I bet you they'll cut you a deal. Um, Although it's funny because Microsoft has been trying for a very long time to get people to move off of self hosting. Remember, like a lot of the issues that we've had with Exchange over the past few years have been in because Microsoft is slow to release patches for on prem Exchange. And their argument is, well, why don't you just move it into the cloud? Well, I mean, I know why Microsoft wants you to move it into the cloud because you get money for that, right? You get to pay a rental fee for your Exchange server. But there's the pesky regulatory thing, and there are companies that aren't in the U.S. and want to control over their data. Surprise! We found a bug in SharePoint. And here's the other thing too. As you mentioned in the article, this is what makes it especially insidious. One, the traffic looks like normal user traffic. So it's not like you're trying to send flood the machine or you're trying to do like a cross-site scripting attack or anything like that. It really does look like legitimate traffic. But two, one of the things that they're able to steal before you can stop them is the hardware key to the machine, which means that after you abscond with that, you can just get back in unless you change a lot of things on the system. And that's a problem because this creates what we like to refer to as a foothold. And this is one of the things that if you're an attacker, you want persistence. You want to be able to get into the system as surreptitiously as possible, create a foothold, persist, and that way, whenever they've deployed countermeasures, you can get back in whenever you want. And this is one of the things that we saw. I would be willing to bet this is related to the same groups that did the big email hack last year. They don't care about the executive's email box today. I mean, yeah, harvesting all those emails would be really nice. They want access to that email box in 6 months because that's hot intel that they can use or sell or extort with, right? And that's the name of the game here. You get access to a SharePoint server, especially unfettered access because you have hardware keys. You could get design documents for new software or new hardware. You could get a press release a couple of days before it gets released and possibly make yourself a little bit of coin on the side by investing heavily or selling off if you know there's bad news coming. Like, this is problematic. And I promise you, there are auditors out there right now that are licking their chops because they know that SharePoint is going to make them a small fortune for the next couple of years because the amount of time that it's going to take to get those things patched, to verify their patch status, and to continually monitor them to make sure that nobody's already got a foothold in them is going to produce a lot of revenue for cybersecurity companies. Al, would you be worried if you were running SharePoint right now?
Well, Yes. Yes, I would if I was running on-premises SharePoint, whether it was my own or if I was maybe using a service that was being offered to me by a third party that's not Microsoft that were hosting a SharePoint environment for me. I've seen both of those recently in customers, and this would be kind of terrifying that there could be that persistent access over time, and that the mitigation to remove that persistent access doesn't seem to be something that's being directly addressed in these patches. Um, there does need to be an effort out of Microsoft to find a way or to provide a mechanism to lock back out that persistent access without having to, pave the whole road again, rebuild all of your Exchange environment, your SharePoint environment from the ground up, because that's a nightmare. Uh, but I think, Tom, you're right on this one that the slowness of releasing patches, right? 2 weeks after they first saw some vulnerability or some exploitation of this vulnerability before there were patches out for the on-prem SharePoint. You've got to imagine that the reason we haven't seen a big attack on the SharePoint on Office 365 is that that patch was released a lot faster.
Yeah, and that's one of the other things that they're talking about here, because somebody asked me this yesterday. Do you think that this affects the cloud services too? And my initial thought before I read more reports was, yeah, well, of course, if it's a flaw in SharePoint, it's going to affect it whether it's on-prem or hosted. The difference, of course, is that if it's hosted in Microsoft Azure, we can patch it right away. And I'm sure that they deployed those patches the instant they were ready so that their cloud customers were at least not affected by this, which is probably going to be a selling point, right? If you want to be protected from all this stuff migrated into SharePoint Online, and you won't have these problems, which kind of feels a little bit disingenuous, right? If you're not going to keep the on-prem software up to date, why bother selling it? I Here's the other thing that people really need to understand. We talk a lot about this on the rundown. Like I joke all the time that if I just wanted to do my stories all were breach stories or exploit stories, I could. I mean, that's basically what the Risky Business podcast is all about, right? But this one was not one that was only on like Bleeping Computer or the Register. This hit the Washington Post. This hit Reuters. This was big. This is big. When regular traditional news outlets pick up on your problems, you have messed up. And so, Microsoft, you need to get the dwell time on those patches down a little bit, and you need to start patching versions that are not, like N minus two at the very least. But also, you need to make sure that your on premises customers are getting the same level of service as your cloud customers. Because if you don't, you're going to have a bunch of unhappy people who are just going to dump this and go back to the good old fashioned thing of burning all their documents to CDs and passing them around the office like frisbees.